you. Yes.
Go ahead, please.
I think just let's introduce the second meeting, because this is the second meeting of Remy after the one we had the 22nd of November. I think at this point, the first thing I can say is that I made a contribution in that first meeting in the form of a paper which was circulated, and I hope that everybody present here has a copy of that paper. Is that the case? Is anyone who doesn't have a copy? Yeah, thank you, Gerard. Is anybody who doesn't have a copy of that paper of the first meeting?
Because I posted it yesterday.
Sorry, you sent it yesterday, but I sent it, I made it available the 22nd of November.
The earlier one, I think everybody has that. Earlier one has been posted several times. So if
so you think it's already stale, it has already been too long. Right. Okay, so that was the first Remy meeting, which its purpose was to support methodologically an improvement of policy making, of policy processes. And for that purpose, I introduced a number of topics, including the meeting, the Y-plan methodology, and something regarding a model to improve or to develop the viable system model. So those were the main focus of that contribution. In this today, and I think that's something that I would like Jason to contribute as well there. Jason, are you there? Has gone already. Jason, I think one issue that I feel is very important to get it now is, do we have Klaus Kauffman present in this meeting? Is he coming? Are you there? Jason, you need to change to make available your microphone.
Kauffman said he will come, but he asked me to send him the meeting link again. I sent it, and not sure he is getting it or not. But once he realized, I think he will be here.
Because one of the things I felt was that his 5 slides regarding the problems of interactivity and all the aspects that I would relate to a more systemic, basic contribution were very, very important, and I would like them to be somehow discussed as long as he is present, because those 5 slides he sent to us, I felt were particularly useful. Mm. And I would be interested to see that he gets in and that we discuss them from his perspective. But as long as he's not with us, I would prefer to continue with the introduction of what I felt was the third major contribution to this meeting, and that is the contribution by Klaus Otto Wenne, who he sent me a paper, and I passed it to, and I hope that everybody has received a copy of that paper. Is that the case? Yeah. And that paper is very much complementary and supports the paper that I wrote about the Westphalian dilemma. So in this case, perhaps the best thing we can do is to invite Klaus Otto to, if you are in agreement, Klaus Otto, I would like you to invite you to give an introduction to your paper.
I have to say that that one of the speakers at the 22nd of November, I haven't really prepared any contribution, but ad lib, let me try to do it. The tone of my paper, I think, is different from that one of Raul. I'm not after to find any new design principles. Rather, the word explain or explanation is what I'm searching for. And that maybe have to do with my original background as a experimental nuclear physicist. It covers, of course, if you include the appendices, it goes actually from quantum physics to policy science, which well, maybe perceived as a bit of arrogancy from my side, but that's the way I am. And what it tries to do is to point out that the original concept of Förster, von Förster, who also refers back to McCulloch, of double closure, almost could be considered as a meme, as a mimesis, where you would then define the mimesis as a sort of informational package for a culture or within a culture, and the culture being ours, the scientific community. So you find this double closure from the very smallest atomic dimension up until the what I would say the Westphalian nation states. And of course, what I have been investigating myself is to find it as an explanation for the learning curve, which is, of course, a very important tool in energy policy. When I was at the International Energy Agencies in about 20 years ago, I wrote a book about it, and it seems that that book has actually still has some actuality. I don't know how much if I start to describe the content of the paper, we will, of course, and it will take quite a long time. Maybe it would be better just to open a space for questions from those who have read the paper. I'm fully aware that there are many things in it that really needs further reflection and explanation. I mean, the concept of closure and operational closure itself is not clear. It needs more discussions. I noticed, for instance, that you were using the term operational closure, Raul, in your contribution 22nd of November, both for what you call autonomous states and independent states. If you go back to Varela and Maturana, they talk about operational closure in different domains. So maybe one has to ask whether there is operational closure in all the same domains for autonomous and independent states. If you look at if you take your example from the US, of course, the states has given up their operational closure in certain domains, and you can see the back and forth with the abortion laws. Can be said that first in the 1970s, the Supreme Court took away that particular domain from the states, and then in the reverse decision they took this last year, they returned it again, which of course some of the most conservative states immediately used. So that may be, when you talk about operational closure, that maybe you have to define in what domains you have operational closure. Just an example of the type of problematization that you have to make when you start looking into the ideas of operational closure and double closure and so on.
Yeah. Clearly, I see operational closure as a structural operation within a system, and the one that makes it autonomous. And as I say in my paper, autonomy is one aspect, but independence it requires autonomy within. Autonomous is within a framework, and independence is far more open to the external conditions. So in both cases, I see operational closure. I think one is within the framework of an organization, and in the other is very much independent of an external organization, implying something to restrict the organization. Let me try to bring in some elements. Are you seeing my slides here or not?
Yeah, you can go ahead and share.
Can you help me? Can you help me, Jason? I just want to show. I want to show a few slides.
You push the share screen button. to choose
I
the
think
screen.
I'm going to go to.
There is a green button on bottom line. It says share screen.
Yes, I think
You just click that one, and it will ask you which screen. If you have more than one screen, then that screen with your slides, you can click. You can choose.
Yeah, so if I go to the, I have
screen.
now the screen, and where is it? No, this is not the Zoom screen, the one I have.
And you should also have your meetings Zoom screen window, Zoom window, in where you see our heads listed there, and in a bottom line there is a line of various buttons, and there is a green one with a little arrow pointing up. It says share screen.
Yeah, but I'm unfortunately so far I'm failing to see the Zoom.
Can you see us, Raul? Can you see us?
I can see you now.
Okay, so at the bottom of this particular window, if you move your mouse a little bit, it will show up a black line with icons.
Unfortunately, I don't see anything there.
Try to move your mouse a bit because it hides, and go with your mouse into the window. Zoom.
Maybe someone can share the screen showing where is that button.
Share screen is there.
Great. Click it.
Have I done it?
It's starting.
Yeah, it's starting. Good. We see your slide now.
Right. And so if I move here, you can see my slides. Yeah.
You currently come to the title page.
Okay. So the first Remy meeting was the one we were talking about, and I as I mentioned at the beginning, I want to have a complementarity with Stuart Kauffman's ideas about the Westphalian paper, which I think I'll wait for him to turn up. And then I think we have Klaas Otto's double closure to explain behavior of social systems. Double closure is focused on technology learning systems, as he establishes, and the double closed learning system is manifested by eigen behaviors consistent with learning rates that agree with empirical observations. The comprehensive empirical evidence for the cybernetic theory of learning systems suggests testing the approach for the Westphalian nation states. This is his contribution. Klaas Otto, do you agree with this point I'm making here?
Yes.
It's a slightly modification of the abstract of your paper.
Yeah, I like that you have made especially stressed empirical observation, because that is of course my own persona as an experimental physicist. You have to always refer your theoretical speculations to empirical observations or experiments.
Yeah.
And this somehow, for myself, this is where I anchor myself and make me convinced that the Förster's idea of double closure is really a good one.
Right, because in connection to double closure, I think one of the aspects that you introduce in your paper is the distinction between von Förster's trivial and non-trivial machines.
Yes, that is a very important distinction.
And
it goes for all types of modeling, by the way.
Sorry?
The model itself is usually a trivial machine, but the modeling is a non-trivial machine.
Right, and I think what I felt was very interesting here was that when you have a black box and you have input and output, which don't just have a straight transformation of one to the other without any contribution from within the black box, then you have the trivial machine. So that is when input is always the same input always produces the same output in the environment.
Yes.
And then the most interesting part of the whole proposition is that when you are within the black box and the black box is transforming itself through different processes, and you have the sort of self-reflective learning, the self-reflective loop, which is producing an identity for the box, and that is the Z that you have produced, you have there. So you have computing is precisely what happens within the black box in order to modify the transformation within it and make it constantly evolving, and that is the non-trivial machine. Am I correct?
Yes, yes. And then if you go the next level of explanation, then you look into what type of help you get for non-equilibrium thermodynamics and from quantum theory. You can analyze this with the help of the entropy ideas, and that will then connect what you see. That is the relation between input and output. That is really what can be measured. That is what can be seen. You can correlate that to what is passing inside the machine, assuming that you have what I call local entropic neutrality, meaning that the entropy of this non-trivial machine rests the same because the flow of entropy coming from the input-output is equal to the production of entropy within the machine. And then if you then turn to what the help you can get from quantum physics, then you will observe that actually computing and proceeding are orthogonal to each other.
I think the point I see myself in these connected to the first paper is that when you have these processes, computing processes, what is happening there is that you have, on the one hand, problems of adaptation to the environment.
Yes.
And that is something that relates to different variety situations. And on the other hand, in the computing, you have, and the self-reflecting loop, what you have is all the aspects of production within what is paradoxically is this computing is producing what the system is all about.
Yes, that's right.
So
That's right.
So the computing is producing, and the producing is adapting to the world in which the black box is operating.
Yes, and use, if I may come, and using the terminology introduced by Kauffman last time, you could say that this is autocatalytic.
Yeah.
The machine catalyzes itself. It's like that is, of course, one of the major ideas investigated by Prigozhin, Ilya Prigozhin, that when you have autocatalytic reactions, and he does it for chemistry, so very with the Brasilator and whatever. And then you get highly non-linear reactions. And of course, the learning curve is highly non-linear because it's really a double logarithmic relation.
Yeah, I think what I want to make is a connection between all of these that you are talking about to the ideas of the enterprise complexity model and the ideas of the viable system model. And that's what I was introducing in my paper last time. Now, what is interesting to me is that this mechanism that you have been describing here between producing and computing is a mechanism that I would connect very strongly to the learning, to all the aspects of a viable system in relation to its environment. So there you have the black box, which is a non-trivial machine according to what we are saying, is trying to build up something that produces some modification and adaptation to the environment. And at the same time, the system is adjusting itself so that it creates some kind of implementing of the ideas that are in the black box. So what I am trying to say is that generally we don't have in society very precise organizations. What we have is a whole range of resources, and these resources are distributed throughout the system. The problem is how to bring them together into some sort of processes that will create outputs or results in the environment that in the end will be connected to what you refer to in your next, the double closure Westphalian nation state, where you say producing welfare is what the black box is doing, and the self-reflecting loop is computing civil society political system, and that is what in the end is connected to the environment and what you call here the avatar the power triangle that is bringing together the system into some sort of performance. And that's one thing that I would like to see how you respond to that. And I can see also that Igor is trying to come in. So I'll pass to Igor in a minute that. But
okay, can I just make one before you pass on to this slide? Can I make one more comment about the old slide? And that is directly relating to how do the things build together? I mean, how are you getting entangled and entanglement really in the real life? Because if you look at the learning curve is global. It really points to the fact that you have a self-organization within, for instance, the production system for, let's say, the best example is, of course, always the photovoltaic modules. And it means that, for instance, when you had a lot of deployment through the German Gesetz für Erneuerbare Energien, you had a lot of deployment within Germany, and Germany in the up until 2012 was providing a lot of the $150 billion that were needed for learning investments. That was passed on as the relay was passed on to China around 2012. And that was, if you look at it from the point of view of the learning system and the learning curve, it tells you that it was seamless. You really have a sort of, the word entanglement is of course very popular right now after the Nobel Prize, but you really have an entangled system here. And I think that François Dubois, he was onto this, and he coined for the social systems. I have to check, was it intrinsic or intricate? I don't remember. He wanted to use that instead of entangled. Sorry?
So that was an interference. It wasn't part of the system.
Okay. So just that's a point I want to make here, that this system really turns out to be self-organizing on the global level. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Igor, what do you want to add?
Oh, usually I have questions, not answers. Regarding this particular picture we're looking at, now I was wondering, you know, if we're looking at the output, what's the output radius? What's the output size? Basically, is it global? Is it bacterial level? Is it? I think this is an important question in observing such a system. So, how large the output is on the environment, because that should be related to the learning speed. So if we have, for instance, very fast learning speed of the first and second order, okay, and relatively limited output, it's a completely different thing that if you have a multinational corporation which is learning at a very slow speed, but its output is global. So, but on the third hand, if you have something which has a global output, basically global effect radius with a very fast second and first level learning speed, then this can cause a major shift in the environment. And if as Klaus Otto said, you know, you have a double exponential learning loop increase in speed, right? Klaus Otto. In this case, and then I'll stop and I'll give the word back to Raul and Klaus Otto, because I'm interested in what you have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was a thing that bothered me very much when I started with this, because when you look at the observations, if you look at observations on a yearly basis, or shall you go in and look at even closer at a monthly basis, or shall you average them out over 2 or 3 years and have a rolling, what do they call average over 3 years? It turns out that if you look at it from annual accumulated and values over by annual, you get about the same answer, whether you do it annually or whether you have a rolling average over several years. So experimentally or observationally, it doesn't matter very much. But the point is important that you're making. What is actually because the SRL, what it does, it measures the eigentime of this system, and that is a very, very important point when you make the detailed analysis. I'm not going into details here. The detailed analysis with a non-equilibrium thermodynamics, because you're using the eigentime in order to really foster out the relation between the observations of input and output and what is going on inside the system. So your point is a very good one, but the observational points that we have doesn't give us any chance actually to delve deeper into.
Okay.
The main point I take away from here is that you do have a self-organized global system.
Okay, Klaus Otto, I think we will come back to this, but at the moment I can see that Louis Kauffman is with us, and I want to bring his contribution to our last meeting into this one, and connect it to your own contribution, Klaus Otto, and to my own. Louis, are you there?
I'm here.
Right. I think what I found very valuable of your 5 slides last time is that you were going to the fundamental particles, if you wish, or components, and seeing how was it possible for them to connect, to link to each other, and as a result of some catalytic processes produce certain outcomes that eventually could lead to some kind of organization and could lead to some form of self-organization, which is something that you were trying to explain through your slides.
That's right. Yes.
And I think from my perspective, I was trying to say I'm much more focused on the purposes that people generate together, and how is it that they eventually find out some recursive structures that would help to produce the outcomes of the situation for the social system.
That's right. And of course, what I was talking about is recursion arising. And there are two modalities in which recursion can be arising. It can be arising just out of the molecular level, as it were, out of the interactional level. And it can be arising out of a full circuit of observation involving all of that. And those mix together in all situations that we know.
All right. Because one of the things is that when you don't have, you are not talking about the specific organizations, you are not talking about the specific entities, but you are talking about resources that are distributed in the environment.
Well, what I'm calling resources might in fact be entities.
Entities, but these entities are not in the form of organizational systems, but they are entities that may well be somehow independent one of the other, and that eventually through catalysts they may come together.
Right, but they themselves, whatever we indicated as like molecules, those themselves could be organizations.
They could be. I think we need to clarify what our purpose is. They could be organizations, but in the context of my contribution last time, I was looking for viable organizations. I was looking for organizations that had the capacity to create, regulate, and implement their own policies.
Exactly. So the vertices that I was using, they could be people.
They could be people, but these people may not be working together as holistic systems. They may be non-holistic, and their real challenge is to start generating this holism among them.
Right. And then the question from the point of view of that I was using was, what would be a catalyst that would work in a given situation?
And that's what we need to find. We need to find the catalysts that, and the point there is that they may trigger self-organization.
Yes.
So that at the end of the day, these catalysts, which are seeing different people, different components, which are not at the moment interacting, may start to build up some connections between them, and through these connections they generate self-organization, and this self-organization is the one that, in the context of my proposition, they will be recursive elements in the whole process of building up organizational systems with a policy capacity.
Yeah.
Yes. So rather than going from the top down, your proposal was very much coming from the bottom up. Yeah. And really what we find, and as you will see in my propositions, what you will find is that you have many different components and parts distributed who are not very well recursively organized, but that in the process that I am interested in, I'm interested to build up recursion among them so that they improve the capacity for policy making in the situation of concern.
Yes.
Yes. So the idea is that we have separated parts which somehow we catalyze them into connections and relations, and they produce self-organization, and this self-organization can build up some recursion, and this recursion is the one that I was proposing was necessary to improve the quality of policy processes in situations of our interest.
Right, very good.
So the interesting part of all of the of my proposal was that well, the viable system model is starting from a holistic approach from the beginning. In the case that we are talking about, we may have these components which are not viable, but through processes of catalysm and processes of interaction, they may start to build up self-organization. And one of the policy directions is to bring them together so that eventually they come into recursive structures that we will find they are contributing to the policy processes. And the next aspect of that was that I was saying the cybernetic methodology, which is I'm going to go to that. The Y-plan methodology, what it's trying to do is build up through the black loop there, is to build up this cybernetic components and the loops that have self-organization and have capacity to improve the study of the situation of interest. And the other loop, the external loop, is the white loop, is essentially saying this is the issue of our interest, for instance, climate change or energy policies and so on. And what is the interesting part of our approach here is that we are having people modeling policy issues, dealing with aspects like energy or aspects like resources, sustainability, and all of that. And through these studies and dealing with them, they will be trying to find out the kind of organizational systems that would help them to interact more effectively. And through their interactions, and I call here self-organization, connecting variety imbalances, and so on, what is happening there is that the external loop is improving its capacity to handle the problems of sustainability, the problems of energy management, and all these things. And through the internal one, what we are trying to do is to improve the organization structures that will create the conditions for these interactions to be more effective. And that's where I can see the building up of the approach that you were suggesting last time could be a bottom-up approach to connect in this reflexivity and through that generate better policy structures to discuss the policy issues of our interest. Does it make sense to you what I'm saying?
Yes, certainly.
What more than that?
The sort of thing that I was suggesting is certainly implicit in what goes on here. It just has to do with maybe some thoughts that are related to it, such as the stability of the entire system. What is it about that system that you've outlined that is going to make it effective, or what is it that's going to make it prolong itself? What is the actual self-organization of the system that is happening there? One can always ask these questions, right?
Yes, one can always ask these questions, and what I would be saying is, when I am interested in policy issues like energy management or sustainability and so on, I would be dealing with structures that may well be viable systems, but may not be, and that's where I bring in the notion of enterprise complexity model, because what you have in the black loop there is a number of resources that may not well be holistically connected very, very precisely, but they may well be in a way looking for some what you would be calling connectivity or relations among the components, and finding out some catalysts that in the end will increase the capacity to generate holistic systems, and that these holistic systems would be the ones that could be used for interactions to deal with the problem situations that are the ones that, from the policy perspective, we are very much interested in.
How does this compare for you with, say, current real world arisings of certain systems? For example, one that I worry about, we all worry about, is that there arose just from the conflict over the Ukraine, a system which you could say self-organized, which consists of the us, USA, and Western countries supplying arms to a country, but that we do not engage in the war directly, but we are essentially having an indirect war with another country through supply of arms to that country, and we're under severe constraints because we don't want that war to explode beyond the war that is actually happening. And we hope to manipulate the constraints in such a way, or that the constraints may work out in such a way that the war eventually winds down. But it's a very delicate, self-organized system that arose as a result of the conflict. How does that actuality fit in with the way you're thinking here?
I hope I can think about that usefully. What we have at the moment in the context of Ukraine, we have a number of countries and a number of situations throughout particularly those countries that are supporting Ukraine, and they are very much independent of each other. You know, they wouldn't like, though they talk to each other and they communicate a lot with each other, what the United States is doing is different to what the United Kingdom or France or any of the others are doing. And eventually, what my thinking in this case would be saying is all these very distributed resources that are being deployed and offered through countries, through them, they will have to somehow be supported in the direction of improving the cybernetics of their interactions. So, and by improving the cybernetics of their interactions, what I would be interested to see is how is that all these resources that come from different parts of the world can somehow strengthen the development of new ideas for Ukraine to deal with the Russian threat, and at the same time making more likely that they will enhance their capacity to adaptation and change, and in that sense create a cybernetic framework, which in a way, improving that cybernetic framework, which is the black loop here, would be if basically in a reflexive time, helping to model the policy issues. In this case, the policy issue is that of dealing with the invasion of Ukraine and construct responses which will be very much the ones that locally this country is trying to build up, and through processes of self-organization and interactions, building up stronger policies. So I know that I'm dealing very roughly with all these, but I'm trying to create the connection between distributed resources, which you cannot really build up as viable systems in those aspects that relate to giving arms and support to Ukraine, relate all those resources into systems, holistic systems that can strengthen the capacity of Ukraine to deal with the problems that they have to handle in a reflexive manner. That is what I see the connection between the multiple resources distributed throughout the world and the specific problems that are being the concern of Ukraine in handling its problems with Russia and dealing with the war that they are into it. Yes.
Thank you.
Igor, did you want to say something?
Just a brief comment. When you're looking at the learning system in an environment, and Louis provided the case of Ukraine versus Russia, Raul was explaining the learning loop on one side, but it's also the learning loop on the other side. And I know that, for instance, in the Second World War, Russia showed extreme capacity to redesign its own military tactics and basically copy all the valuable strategies and tactics from Germany. So in the end of this World War II, it basically learned a lot and gets its army not only in the numbers but also in the efficiency to the German one, who was at the beginning of the Second World War, supreme in all of those cases. So it's not only about the learning of a system; it's also about the learning of the counterpart of the system, or if you want, you can call it environment. But in this case, it's not a general environment. It's
yes, I think you're right that it is a reflexive process. I think what it appears to me is that in this case, in the case that Louis offered to us, what we were trying to deal with is how to improve the holistic response of Western countries to the situation, and on the other hand, not to get into a structure that would threaten the possibilities of independent responses from the Ukraine and its own activities. So all this is saying that it will be necessary to look at this also from the perspective of the other side, and we could be trying to look at Ukraine as a holistic situation and its connection with the rest of the world. But I have basically tried to explain the one from the rest of the world in connection to Ukraine. Louis, does it, the example, does it help you?
Yes, yes, very much.
I would like you to say, is there anything that hasn't been properly developed here so that we can do something better?
Well, one is aware that when systems develop, they go of this kind, they go into a certain kind of equilibrium that is their self-organization, and that sometimes there are aspects which, if they were just changed a little bit, the whole thing would completely change in its organizational form. An example, a political example, is the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall goes down and an entirely different organizational form arises. And it wasn't at the point of that change, it was a change that could happen. It was almost a matter of just removing a symbol from something.
Right. I like that that you are adding a particular response that happened during the Second World War. But before we move into that, I think I can see Marcus trying to say something. Can you?
Yes, I just have a methodological question. You are studying self-organization, and I see it on your slides. My question is whether the study of self-organization needs quantitative methods or not. Do you have experience with quantitative methods, for example, in the development of a set of indicators indicating the state of self-organization? Or is that question irrelevant?
Yes, I think perhaps Klaus Otto can help us with this, because there is in all these processes of self-organization, there is no doubt that there is a whole range of quantitative aspects, and particularly we can develop ideas about how is it that we catalyze certain processes, we increase connectivity among certain parts, and therefore generate through that different responses. So is there anything that you can help with in this connection, Klaus Otto?
I can point to two cases which may answer a little bit of Marcus' concerns, because there is really observations here. And of course, I'm taking it from my studies of the learning curve. There are two reactions that are interested in the learning curve. As first I said to you, the very drastic one is that it zeroes itself. That is, you have a logarithmic, double logarithmic equation, and it means that you are learning very, very quickly in the beginning. It looks like that, and then slower as you proceed. And if you could then start from the beginning with your technology, and actually there is an instance there. If you go and look at the oil industry and the let's say wildcats, where you are boring for oil in new areas, and this is I've documented this, so I can easily give you references. And it turns out in this case you really get a zero, and that has to do with, my interpretation is it has to do with the digital revolution. I mean, with the advent of computers, first the big ones, and then the very distributed laptops. which made your possibility of investigating your geological strata so fantastic. And this really then zeroed. It really zeroed the finding, the learning curve for wildcats. Also, wildcats is when you bore for oil in a new area. And another one, which is more recent, this happened in the 60s and the 70s. The more recent one is actually the PV modules, where you had not a zero.
Photovoltaic, these are the photovoltaic modules.
No, the photovoltaic modules. And that happened very recently, 2012, where you had up until beginning of the by the millennium, up to the millennium, about the industry was just using what you would call the spin-off from the semiconductor industry very cheaply. But as you have the exponential growth of the PV industry, they run out of material. And you can see that very nicely as a sort of a silicon bubble. The price of silicon for the industry raised by about 400%. And then that meant they had to start to build their own factories for semiconductors, for the material. And what happened then was that these factories were included in the learning system. So you got a re-evaluation of the learning of the system boundaries, and that just made let's say, made a parallel displacement of the learning curve, which, however, as it came, was rather fantastic, because it meant that the PV that you see today, the photovoltaic that you see today, the break-even point changed and was put forward by about 5 years. It's quite fantastic, and you saved an enormous amount of learning investment. It was not so drastic, but this is, I think, 2 examples which are open to investigation. And regarding also, I know what Marcus, you did some work for banking, wasn't it? A couple of times ago, and you found that in order to make this technological leap, so to speak, there had to be a rather strong pressure on the system, because this meant you have to change very much in the system. So the system has somehow to fail. And you see that when you look into the finding, the successful opening of wildcats, that it got worse. And then, as it got worse, this very conservative industry realized we had to do something about it. And then came this rather drastic change of within the industry of finding new oil fields and so on. And you can there was a lot of I was discussing this with the Schlumberger in Paris for some time. There was, but you really saw it, that the efficiency of the industry went down, and then they had to do something, and then came this jump in and I think that verifies some of the what Marcus did. Was it for the banking system, where you have
measuring the experience curve? Actually, we use a term in corporate context. We talk about the experience curve, and it's practically you can use it as a synonym for learning curve, even though there are some fine aspects of it. So
yes,
actually, you can find the pattern of the learning curve in any sector.
Yeah.
And
right, exactly.
And the interesting thing we have found is that the experience curve is being realized independent as someone will realize it and others will not. And we have even seen leaders of the market, biggest market share, fall out of the market because they hadn't realized the cost level. And that's very interesting. Someone will reduce the cost level along the experience curve. And in the long run, these will be the leaders.
No.
Now, this is very simplified because you cannot compare, for example, I don't know, a computer of today and 20 years ago. You have to adjust the measurements. So the unit is not the computer, the unit are other things. The unit can be chips, for example, or bits or something like that. So is that more in your direction? Is that answering your question? I have another point, Klaus Otto. You mentioned a book you wrote. Could you tell us about that book?
Yeah, it's actually it's very easy to get it because it's available on free download on the internet. So you can
it's
have
part of the International Energy Agency.
Yeah.
International
I don't
Energy
know
Agency.
if the IA have started to.
It's part of the
download,
International Agency.
If you go to ResearchGate.
Yeah.
What you call it?
Yes.
So I find it under your name.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. That's
actually
fine.
you can just the easiest is just to say experience curves for energy technology policy to your Google, and that will find it for you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for Marcus here. I know you have followed this Viplan methodology. Can you connect what Klaus Otto was talking about photovoltaic developments to this?
Yes, I mean the photovoltaic elements, they follow the experience curve. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we knew that the photovoltaic method had been invented, the technology had been invented, but it was way too expensive for everybody. So if you thought in terms of, Klaus Otto would think in terms of the experience curve or the learning curve, and so would I. We would not be so afraid. We would say, well, along the experience curve, sooner or later, this is going to get into a range where it is affordable. And that's where we are now.
Yeah.
Let me also add a little bit. We are getting into details here, but batteries follow the same experience curve with a 20% learning rate. There is a good paper on that. And my prognosis is that if you go into this SMR, they will also follow the 20% learning curve because, and there we come to this figure that we have with the double closure, because if the SMR can really be made in the same way as you make cars, I mean, in factories, then you will not have this interference all the time from the external loop that kills the learning rate for nuclear reactors. So so that prognosis for 20% is only if you really can license, or what you call it, type. I search for the English word, like you do for cars. That is, you really certificate you put the certificate for the type of cars, not for each individual car, which we do for the large nuclear reactors. If you can do that for the factory produced SMR, then you will have a 20% reduction by each doubling of the number of reactors. Okay, this was details now.
Right. So I
It
think
reflects to that double closure, because
I think
it depends on how you can handle the environmental avatar.
Claes Otto, can you connect the double closure to these two loops that we have in front of us?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure I can do it. This is a little bit like, if I may be quantum physics, it depends on how you are transforming your coordinating logic. So it may be that you have a mixture of the two loops into this when you try to
because I think
compare them.
I
can't. My immediate reaction is I wouldn't say this is the external one and this is the internal one, and they fold very nicely into each other. I think you have a little bit of each.
Because one thing that perhaps we can reflect on is that with the photovoltaic developments over the 40 years that we have been talking about, what you have is a variety of institutions, a variety of organizations, enterprises involved in the process of dealing with one particular policy issue, which was the policy issue of increasing fuel resources in the development of energy. So what we had over the 40 years was a huge range of countries, enterprises, institutions like the International Energy Agency, and so on, all of them dealing with the problem of photovoltaic energy. And what is interesting now is that somehow they had to connect themselves. They had to build up interactions so that eventually they would become more effective at the level of generating this type of energy, photovoltaic, the photovoltaic energy, which has happened. So the photovoltaic energy is a fantastic example of a particular policy that developed at an incredible speed and generated incredible results over the past 40 years. Now, the question that I was asking you, Claes Otto, was essentially saying, is there any way in which we can connect the multiple institutions, starting from the one that you know very well, which is the International Energy Agency, IEA, relating that to the multiple enterprises throughout the world towards generating the response that we have seen, which is empirically has been building up the 20% learning that you have been proposing. Now, the question is there any way in which we can connect the IEA directing the developments or supporting the developments of the different countries and different enterprises in the black loop that I am referring to here, so that they eventually were triggering responses for the development of the industry, the photovoltaic industry, and creating through that a better energy response for the world as a whole. Is there anything that you can connect with these two? One would be the inner loop, the black loop would be improving the structures and making the IEA more responsive to the world's energy needs. And the other one would be trying to work out specifically how is it that different institutions and different organizations were building up responses in the context of a better organizational system.
That goes back to your slide that you showed about the IEA before. Actually, within the IEA, there has always been something called implementing agreements. And those has been focusing on different technologies. So the PV has had their implementing agreements with annexes within this agreement. And that means an implementing agreement, that is a voluntary agreement among members of the IEA, where they provide resources to their own R&D people. But they are having meeting together and working together on different aspects of the annexes. There are work programs that they work together, and the whole area of implementing agreements within the IEA, I think that would be very interesting to study, because they relate very much, I think, to the two loops you have here. And also points to the difficulties there, because there are vested interests, of course, within certain nations. Like when Japan started the implementation program for in 1993, I think it was, the rooftop program, where they were giving what the microeconomists call subsidies, what I call learning investments to their own industry. It's a little bit what Biden is doing in the USA now. He's just saying we will give learning investments to making electric cars, provided 90% or whatever of the electric car is produced inside US. And the same type of problems you find, and this is of course your black the learning curve actually says the best thing is if you have a global learning system, not that everything is fragmented into different parts. And this discussions, I think you can find maybe not obviously found them, and you have to probably interview some people who has been involved in the implementing agreement. I myself was sitting as a desk officer for one of those implementing agreements when I was at the IEA. But they are quite interesting. Sometimes very frustrating to run, because everything is voluntary. So if someone doesn't follow a timeline, then there is, within the implementing agreement, there is no way of correcting. You have to go then to the national representative, because they are the one giving resources to their national labs or whatever. So, but this I thought about this when you discussed it, when I saw in the 22nd of November, that this is a case that one would like to study, actually, and there are many implementing agreements within my own point is, of course, I left the IEA, that is 20 years ago now, and the present executive director, when he came in, he reorganized very much of IEA, but I assume that the implementing agreements are left working as they were. Sometimes frustrating, sometimes really produced interesting results.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to clarify in my own mind is that in your experience with IEA, it was clear that they had issues of implementation.
Oh yes, but
and that they couldn't handle them within themselves, but they had to go to whatever capabilities were offered by countries or by enterprises worldwide.
No, the secretariat was just having a desk officer who was working with many other things. So he wasn't really producing very much. I wasn't either when I was there. But the implementing agreements themselves were run, as you could call it, a virtual organization with resources from the national to the national representative.
Yes.
And then they had some common tasks that they tried to do together.
Yeah.
But the IEA was providing, shall we say, their soft power. Their soft power is the convening power. So they made this help to convene the implementing agreement and put their stamp. I mean, and it was ready. The implementing agreement was a document with a signed by the different countries. So this is the soft power of IEA, but IEA didn't do their own personnel.
They didn't have any implementation capacity themselves. And this is what in your paper, in the paper that you have distributed now, at the end of that, you talk about the soft power, which are the institutions, and around them you have the nation states and all the sort of United States, China, European Union, building up capacity to do things that perhaps the IEA itself couldn't do. So that somehow it was necessary to build up a connection between the soft enterprise, the soft power, and these other nation states. And that's where we have some of the Westphalian aspects that we have been trying to build up in these conversations.
Yep.
So what you have at the center of this, the black loop is the one that is trying to build up connections with the nation states and the enterprises, the big enterprises, and on the other hand, the outer loop is concerned with creating policies to improve the energy policy worldwide, and that is where I think the interconnection between nation states and institutions becomes very, very central to the development of the policy of energy throughout the world. How does that reflect your experience?
Yeah, you can look at how the structure of the implementing agreements. There was a steering body, which I would say relates pretty well to your blacks loop here. And then there within that, and with everybody was contributing at the let's say they have semi-annual meetings, and there the organization was made of different tasks and annexes, or annexes and then tasks within the annex. So you when you go in and study this, you would probably be able to identify both the black and the white loops here. The documents should be available, so you just have to find some students to
yes. Can you provide
do it for you?
Anyway,
there has to be interviews, I think, with because not a lot, as you know, a lot of things.
Yes, I think. However, I would love to see whether anybody else among the group of people participating in this conversation can say anything about these two loops.
May I?
Yes.
And again, Igor.
Igor.
Again, it's the question. Louis presented this catalyst, right?
Yeah.
That actually does, when it's around, things happen, right? Now you're talking about policies which do not affect the eigen system, but should affect other systems. For instance, the international agency with national states. So I don't know, but can we relate this diagram not to the normal systems, but to the catalytic systems? So the systems which are actually catalysts.
I love that.
Does it make sense? I don't know.
It does make sense to me, the idea of catalyst, and
I think Louis should.
But I think rather than myself doing that, I would love to see that Louis himself can connect his idea of catalysts to these two loops.
Well, I can try. You can try. What the question is? What constitutes a catalyst? It might be a charismatic individual, or it might be some kind of change that's possible that will then catalyze a larger change in the system. I think that the idea of catalyst is one that's worth contemplating, but it's not going to be immediate where you're going to locate that catalyst.
Can you expand a little bit more the idea of catalyst? Because catalyst.
Well, yeah, my original idea of catalyst at the social level would be an individual who originates something important for the organization. So a scientist who makes a great discovery acts as a catalyst, or a politician who takes a very strong stand and people gather around him acts as a catalyst. Or in chemistry, a catalyst acting the way it does. But it has some locality, and influence, right? And then you realize that something might be catalytic and then disappear in the process. I mean, it's just a one-time only, like we opened the Berlin Wall and that was catalytic for a change. And that catalyst isn't hanging around. So that's a shift in the meaning of the word. But I would follow those shifts in the meaning of the word and think about what is catalytic.
I think what I can see, is that in improving the cybernetics of organizational systems, this notion of catalyst has a significant contribution, because what you have is that you have many resources related to, in the example that Klaus Otto was giving of the voltaic energy. I think what you can have many organizations coming together through some process of catalysm. So the catalysts there are increasing the need for communication. So what appears to be an external communication or a weak communication in a way, when you have a strong catalyst, is increasing the strength of the communications and building up organization where at the moment may not be an organization. So that's where the black loop starts to grow its strength. And as it develops its strength, this organizational system becomes the way in which the catalyst is transformed into action. And that action is the one that is reflexively connected to the different policymakers and the different people who are contributing to energy policy throughout the world, or any other policy throughout the world. So I can see a strong connection between your notion of a catalyst and the idea of improving the cybernetics of organizational systems. Can you connect with that or not?
Yeah, certainly. What I'm also wondering about is how conditions accumulate to a point, or to some criticality, and then a change occurs, as in, for example, sand pile models, things like that. But we see it all the time. And then the catalyst is, the change of action, in any case, occurs globally in the system as a result of moving toward the end of its own constraints. And then there isn't a specific element that's a catalyst, but rather the way the system evolves under its own constraints that results in change.
That is a point that you made in your presentation last time. The idea of constraint and which is connected to the idea of enablers. So constraints are limiting the way in which the components relate to each other and create autonomy and create self-organization.
Yes, but at the moment, I'm thinking of a different model, which we all know. Think of the sand pile model. In fact, think of grains of sand falling and forming a pile, and they always falling, and the pile grows, And it's under the constraints of gravity and contiguity. This pile is growing. It looks like it has a stable form, but because of the actual properties of that system, there comes a place, critical point, where one more grain of sand and it avalanches.
Yeah.
And you get a quick global change in the whole system. Where's the catalyst for that change? It's not a local catalyst hanging around. It is, in fact, the global structure of the system in relation to the constraints that it's under.
Lovely. I think we can make use of that. And in a way, what I see you describing here is how nature and the ways in which the components relate to each other create constraint and create somehow capacity to unfold in certain directions and not in other directions.
Certainly, but that movement toward a critical point happens not only in nature, happens in social systems, happens in political systems. The releasing of the Berlin Wall could be regarded as something like that.
And
came to a point where, oh, it can go.
Tell me, and in the context of the situation of Ukraine today, is there anything equivalent to the Berlin Wall?
I wonder.
I think you wonder in which sense.
Well, I wonder in various directions. Like one commonly mutters to oneself, how long can he go on this way, right? And that he could be one man or another, or one country or another. And one is thinking about how the system is evolving under its constraints and how certain things become thin and subject to change.
That's very interesting, because what I hear you saying is that, going back to this diagram, it is possible that the situation in Ukraine and its leader may have very significant constraints that eventually will limit the development of the organization structure of that country. And as a result of that, will reduce the possibilities to respond to the challenges that are coming from the Russian end. Do you see that as a possibility?
Yeah, exactly. So one wants to be aware of all of that as much as possible. It's very difficult to predict how things will happen.
And this goes back to Klaus Otto's point that we need to have researchers to go and look at these issues in more depth than apparently is going on at this stage, because we don't know what is going on. But if there are things that can be connected to this Y-plan methodology, I would say, from whatever we are saying, are related to constraint, catalysts, and interactions. Right. Is there?
Yes. No, I'm just as an example for the possible candidates for this avalanche, for this acting as catalysts. For example, for IEA, it would of course be, I believe, Kissinger. And of course, the motivated him was what happened with the first oil crisis. But when it comes to the implementing agreement, I would say that the catalysts are certainly, in most cases, you would find that they would be outside the International Energy Agency.
And I have no reason to believe that that is the case, but it's something to think about. I'm wondering whether, Marcus, do you have anything to say about this?
You know, my experience is more at the level of organizations of the meso level, meso, not macro. And so all of this is relevant. I mean, we have a lot of cases of all that, like collapse catalysts and so on. And we are interested in, for example, in comparing processes of self-organization across different organizations. That's why I ask if there's any need or any experience with measuring self-organization. But I don't have much of that experience at the macro level.
Well, you know, the experience about self-organization in nature is something that is happening with beehives.
Yeah.
And you can see how beehives self-organize, and there is plenty of quantification about that. That in a way, that's something for research and for thinking into the future. But I'm just wondering whether people like Larry Richards or James Rose can contribute a little bit to this discussion.
Thank you. Anyway, that's a very good indication.
I've just been a visitor, so I haven't been adding things into the chat. A lot of these topics are happening also in general systems and in various different groups. One of them being the topic at the beginning of the session about autonomy, holism, and the definition of boundaries, the identification of boundaries within it. The extended environments is very much a difficult set of topics that are also being rediscussed over there. On the last bit of conversation about catalysts and especially autocatalysis, I'm bothered that the chemistry term of catalyst is an agent which will lower the energy barriers between existing molecular systems and enable them to interact, produce secondary products, and yet remain unchanged through the whole process. And yet you're using it in a more general term of any impetus or driver, initiator of an actions. And so I just recommend that you just sort of be careful with your use of terminologies that may not translate when you're in discussions with other groups quite exactly well with the intentions of what you're trying to get across. So just that observation. It's a very challenging thing to talk about the general dynamics that happen at the inanimate level and coordinate them with the animate and sociological levels of our lives. I'm a theorist in looking to combine those fields in general systems, but I'm also very tuned to practicalities. So when the Ukrainian situation came up, and I don't know if anyone had a chance to read the chat comment, I was in Russia in 2000 at a complexity conference, but I had contacts with the Russian Academy of Sciences there, who were very close to Putin when he was just getting established into power. And I picked up on nuances of what they were trying to do and where their eventual goals were, so that it became very apparent to me that they were beginning to develop control of the oil fields and pipelines heading into Europe. It was going to put them into a position of authority and power control. And they let that go. The West kept thinking, oh, we have a new partner who is now no longer the Soviet Union, but is now a new capitalist society. And in sort of a way it was, but it was still being controlled by old liners, where Putin, who was a KGB operative and leader, was bringing his perspective to the game. So that was just a tool, and it would put European nations into a position of extreme weakness and vulnerability because he had control of the pipelines. And so when they were trying to reestablish their access to the world oceans and their navies, the best and easiest access was through the Black Sea, and that meant taking the Crimea and then having access to Odessa and all their seaports, so they would have their navies accessible to the world's oceans again to reestablish themselves as a world power. So there are a lot of practicalities that are involved, and I'm fascinated by how you're talking in terms of the generalities of social interactions, the competitions. I'm concerned that the hierarchies of organizations and the last map that's up on, or that was up on the screen before, is very interesting, but every component has its own priority and vested interest or special interest. And they're not always compatible. And the struggle is the challenge, I shouldn't say the struggle, but the challenge is to come to agreements even when there's competition. There has to be some give and take. There's no pure win-win situation. There has to be cooperation and consilience, as Wilson wrote about. So I just, those views.
Yeah, Larry, I just think that your contribution is powerful. In particular, I would like to go back to something that you started talking about, which was the idea of boundary. I think boundaries are very much an aspect that could be related to the generation of self-organizing systems, and would be very, very critical to have methodologies or ways of measuring self-organization and getting interactions in ways that increase our understanding of the boundaries between different parts. So that again, what is leaving me in my head, your comment, is that research is required in all these aspects.
Well, it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a major issue. We like to think in terms of identities and well-defined systems, and that comes from mathematical notions and plus historical identities and the recursions that dependabilities, identities are dependable. But I like to think that even atoms are organized or are architected, I should say, to maintain themselves. Even the basic particles of the universe at that level, we don't think of them that way, but they are self-maintaining by their innate structure. They don't choose to it. They just, the laws of nature establishes them that way. But in the long run, there's nothing exists in isolation. Everything is related to, it exists in coordination and in existential interactions with something else. I am me, I'm a person, I'm a living organism for the time being, right? But but this little glob of air around me was me 5 minutes ago. And this part will be me as I breathe it in, and will become part of my metabolism in about a minute as I inhale. So I don't exist without this entire environment and atmosphere around me. I imagine I do. I pretend that I do. We pretend that we are these separate entities, but in point of fact, we're not. We are these interactions, which are, so we have a conditional boundary. So boundaries, in my way of thinking, are conditional, not something absolute and perfect. You know, if we were sitting in the same room, and I could say that in a moment you had some oxygen atoms in your bodies, I could say you are the reservoir of my life. So we are dependent on each other for survival, or the plant over there in the room. So it's codependent on me. And so it's just a perspective difference that I think would help people understand. We can't come to improving, raise the benefit of the world's quality of life unless we come to an appreciation that we are codependent on each other. We are symbiotic in an extent, in addition to us wanting to be our own individual identities.
Yes, I think one aspect that comes from what you're saying, James, is the idea of embodiment, and somehow some things may come together into very strong connecting aspects, and they develop a bodyhood. They develop something that it has a boundary quite strong. On the other hand, there are these general discussions of ideas that make assumptions about the way parts are connected and generate boundaries in an informational domain and not in the operational domain.
Yeah.
So so these are aspects that I believe could be well developed and enhanced in connection to the diagram that you have in front of you.
But as James is saying, we have to be as sensitive as possible to the way we are splitting apart into information and description and pattern, what is in fact happening organically in the stability of organization.
What do you want to explain with that?
Well, when we try to talk about in an abstract way the organization or even the self-organization of some system, we tend to be speaking at an informational level or a formal level about it, but the way in which it actually becomes self-organizing is more organic than that and depends on the kind of interdependence that James is referring to, that is complicated but absolutely part of the way the universe is working.
And I believe this was very much at the core of your contribution last time.
Mm.
Because you were talking about boundaries, you were talking about all the aspects that we could connect to self-organization in the operational domain, rather than just global thinking about what is that brings together something.
Right, well, we need both.
We need both, and it would be useful to have some comments or some further developments. I would be very, very interested to hear from you, Luis, further developments of the ideas that you proposed last time. Is that something that you might consider?
Yeah, I'll keep thinking about it. At another point, I can try to organize it.
Yes, I think naturally, unless something is organized and developed there, this conversation is coming to an end now.
Let's go back to thinking mode. Ready to finish?
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
Okay. Max, You want to say something?
No.
Okay.
And
So in
where
that
is
case-
Class Otto? Class Otto?
Class Soto.
Oh, I'm satisfied. I'm very interesting.
Larry?
Very good.
Afternoon.
Okay. Igor?
I loved you guys. You were great.
Okay. Claudia, you haven't said anything.
Yes, all good. I'm thinking.
Okay, great. Let's all go back to thinking mode. Thank you so much, guys. See
Thank
next
you.
time. See you
Thank you,
next
Jason.
time.
Thank you.